HMS Phaeton was a 38-gun Minerva-class fifth rate of Britain's Royal Navy. This frigate was most noted for her intrusion into Nagasaki harbour in 1808. John Smallshaw built Phaeton in Liverpool between 1780 and 1782. She participated in numerous engagements during the French Revolutionary Wars and the Napoleonic Wars, during which service she captured many prizes. Francis Beaufort, inventor of the Beaufort wind scale, was a lieutenant on Phaeton when he distinguished himself during a successful cutting-out expedition. Phaeton sailed to the Pacific in 1805 and returned in 1812. She was finally sold on the 26th of March 1828. Early years. Phaeton was commissioned in March 1782. Within a year she had been paid off. Service in the Channel. In December 1792 Phaeton was commissioned under Sir Andrew Snape Douglas. In March 1793 Phaeton captured the 4-gun privateer l'Agréable Liberté. Then on the 14th of April Phaeton sighted the French privateer Général d'Armorières of 22 6-pounder guns and 196 men, and her Spanish prize, the Santiago, 140 leagues to the west of Cape Finisterre. Phaeton was part of Admiral John Gall's squadron, and the entire squadron set off in pursuit, but it was Phaeton that made the actual capture. Santiago had been sailing from Lima to Spain when General d'Armorières captured her on the 11th of April. In trying to fend off General d'Armorières, Santiago fought for 5 hours, losing 10 men killed and 37 wounded before she struck. She also suffered extensive damage to her upper works. Santiago's cargo, which had taken 2 years to collect, was the richest ever trusted on board a single ship. Early estimates put the value of the cargo as some £1.20 and £1.3 million. The most valuable portion of the cargo was a large number of gold bars that had a thin covering of pewter and that were listed on the manifest as fine pewter. General d'Armorières had taken on board 680 cases, each containing $3,000, plus several packages worth £2,000 to £3,000. The ships that conveyed Santiago to Portsmouth were St. George, Egmont, Edgar, Ganges and Phaeton. The money came over London Bridge in 21 wagons, escorted by a party of light dragoons, and lodged in the Tower of London. On the 11th of December the High Court of Admiralty decided that the ship should be restored to Spain, less 1/8 of the value after expenses for salvage, provided the Spanish released British ships held at Corunna. The agents for the captors appealed, and on the 4th of February 1795 the Lords of the Council put the value of the cargo at £935,000 and awarded it to the captors. At the time, all the crew, captains, officers and admirals could expect a share in the prize. Admiral Hood's share was £50,000. On the 28th of May Phaeton took the 20-gun prompter off the Spanish coast. The Royal Navy took prompter into service under her existing name. Together with Weasel, Phaeton took 2 privateers in the Channel in June, Poisson Volante, of 10 guns, and General Washington. On the 27th of November Phaeton and Latona took the 28-gun Blonde off Ushant. In February 1794 Phaeton was paid off, but the next month Captain William Bentinck recommissioned her. In 1794, during the Battle of the Glorious 1st of June, Phaeton came to the aid of the dismasted defense. While doing so, Phaeton exchanged broadsides with the French ship of the line Impétueux. Phaeton suffered 3 men killed and 5 wounded. She was the only one of the support vessels to suffer casualties. In 1847 the Admiralty awarded the survivors to that date of all the vessels at the battle, including Phaeton, the Naval General Service Medal with clasp, the 1st of June 1794. Captain Robert Stopford. In September, Phaeton came under the command of Captain Stopford. In May 1795, Phaeton escorted Princess Caroline of Brunswick to England. Then began what would become a spectacular string of prize-taking. During Stopford's service in the Channel, Phaeton captured some 13 privateers and 3 vessels of war, and also recovered numerous vessels that the French had taken. On the 10th of March 1796, Phaeton engaged and captured the French corvette Bon Citoyen off Cape Finisterre. She was armed with 29-pounder guns and had a crew of 145 men. She had left Rochefort on the 4th of March in company with the French frigates Forte, Sen and R.E. Acute G.E. Acute N.E. Acute R.E. Acute T and the brig Mutin, all sailing for the Isle de France with troops and military supplies. Stopford took her back to England as his prize. The Royal Navy then brought her in as Bon Citoyen, a 6th-rate sloop of war. While cruising in the Channel on the 6th of March 1797, Phaeton took the French privateer Active. She was armed with 18 guns and had a crew of 120 men. She had sailed from Nantes on the 17th of February and 10 days later had captured the packet ship Princess Elizabeth, which was her only prize. On the 28th of May, Phaeton, Melpomene, and the hired armed lugger Speedwell detained Frederickstadt. On the 16th of September, Phaeton took the 6-gun Chasseur. Then 2 days later she took the privateer Brunette. Then with Unite she took 16-gun Indian on the 24th of September off the Roches Bonds. On the 9th of October Unite captured Découverte with the 32-gun frigate Stag and Phaeton in company. Phaeton also recaptured 3 British vessels. These were Adamant, Arcade, and Recovery. Then on the 28th of December Phaeton took the 12-gun Hazard in the Bay of Biscay. The next day, the 44-gun Anson, Captain Philip Charles Durham, with Phaeton, retook the 20-gun Sphinx-class post-ship Daphne, which the French had captured almost exactly 3 years earlier. Out of a crew of 276, including 30 passengers of various descriptions, Daphne lost 5 men killed and several wounded before she surrendered. Anson had no casualties. On New Year's Day, 1798, Phaeton took Aventure. On the 19th of February she took the 18-gun Leger in the Channel. On the 22nd of March she participated in damaging the 36-gun frigate Charente near the Cordouan lighthouse. Phaeton fired on Charente, chasing her first into range of the guns the 74-gun third-rate Canada, under the command of Captain Sir John Blaise Warren, with whom she exchanged broadsides. Charente grounded, but then so did Canada. Phaeton and Anson had to abandon the chase to pull Canada free. In the meantime, Charente threw her guns overboard, floated free, and reached the river of Bordeaux, much the worse for wear. With Anson, Phaeton took the 18-gun privateer Mercury on the 31st of August. Mercury was pierced for 20 guns and had a crew of 132 men. She was 1 day out of Bordeaux and had captured nothing. A week later, Anson and Phaeton captured the 32-gun privateer Flore after a 24-hour-long chase. Stopford, in his letter, described Flore as a frigate of 36 guns and 255 men. She was 8 days out of Boulogne on a cruise. Flore had also served the Royal Navy in the American Revolutionary War. Then on the 8th of October Phaeton took the 16-gun privateer Lévrier, together with Ambuscade and Stag. On the 20th of November she took the Hirondelle. On the 24th of November 1798, Phaeton captured the French privateer brig Resolue. Resolue was armed with 18 guns and carried a crew of 70 men. She had previously captured the English merchant ship General Wolfe, sailing from Poole to Newfoundland, and an American sloop sailing from Boston to Hamburg. Stagg later recaptured the American. On the 6th of December, Phaeton and Stagg captured the French privateer brig Resource. She was armed with 10 guns and carried a crew of 66 men. She had sailed from La Rochelle 2 days previously and was sailing for the African coast. Ambuscade shared in the prize money for both Resolue and Resource. Mediterranean. In July 1799, Captain Sir James Nicholl Morris took command of Phaeton and sailed with Lord Elgin, of the eponymous Elgin Marbles, for Constantinople. Elgin would be Britain's ambassador to the Ottoman Empire until 1803. In May 1800 she participated in the blockade of Genoa as part of Lord Keith's squadron. The Austrian general besieging the city, Baron Dott, particularly appreciated her fire in support of the Austrian army. On the 14th of April 1800, Phaeton and Peterel captured the St. Rosalia. Phaeton had to share her share of the proceeds with 5 vessels due to a prior agreement. On the 3rd of May, Mutin, Phaeton and Chameleon captured 8 vessels in Anguilla Bay, Stella de Norte, Santa Maria, Nostra Senora del Carmine, Fiat Volantis Deus, Nostra Senora della Santa, Nostra Senora de Asunzove, San Nicolas and San Joseph. 5 days later they captured 11 Genoese vessels. They captured the first 8 at St. Remo, Paleka Ship Street, Giovanni, which was sailing in ballast from St. Remo, Paleko brig Achille, which was sailing from Marseille to Genoa with a cargo of corn and wine, Paleka Bark Street, Antonio, which was sailing from Sète to Genoa with a cargo of wine, Paleko brig Santa, which was sailing from Ard to Port Morris with a cargo of wine, Paleka ship Conception, sailing in ballast to Port Morris, Paleka ship Madonna del Carmine, sailing from Sète to Genoa with a cargo of wine, Seti Senora del Carmine, which was sailing from Marseille to Genoa with a cargo of corn, Seti Street, Giuseppe, which was sailing from Marseille to Port Morris with a cargo of corn, Seti Immaculate Conception, which was sailing from Sète to Genoa with a cargo of wine, Seti Imina Purgatorio, which sailing from Sète to Genoa with a cargo of wine, and Seti Virgin Rosaria, which was sailing from Sète to Genoa with a cargo of wine. On the 25th of October, Phaeton chased a Spanish Polaca to an anchorage under a battery of 5 heavy guns at Fuengirola, where she joined a French privateer brig. The following night the brig escaped, while the Polaca tried twice, unsuccessfully, to escape to Malaga. On the night of the 27th of October, Francis Beaufort led Phaeton's boats on a cutting-out expedition. Unfortunately, the launch, with a carronade, was unable to keep up and was still out of range when a French privateer schooner, which had come into the anchorage unseen, fired on the other boats. The barge and 2 cutters immediately made straight for the Polaca and succeeded in securing her by 5 a.m. The captured ship was the San Joseph, alias Aglis, of 2 24-pounder iron guns, 2 brass 18-pounder guns as stern chases, 4 brass 12-pounder guns and 6 6-pounder guns. She was a packet carrying provisions between Malaga and Velia. She had a crew of 49 seamen, though 15 were away, and there were also 22 soldiers on board to act as marines. The boarding party suffered 1 man killed and 3 wounded, including Beaufort, who received, but survived, 19 wounds. The Spanish sustained at least 13 wounded. Once Morris was sure that his men had secured the prize, he sailed Phaeton in pursuit of a second pollica that had passed earlier. Sailing from Ceuta to Malaga, Phaeton was able to catch her under a battery at Cape Molino. While Phaeton was returning to pick up Beaufort, his men, and the prize, the French privateer schooner sailed past, too far away for Phaeton to intercept. The British immediately commissioned San Joseph as a British sloop of war under the name Calpe, the ancient name for Gibraltar. Although it would have been usual to promote Beaufort, the successful and heroic leader of the expedition, to command Calpe, Lord Keith chose instead George Dundas, who not only was not present at the battle, but was junior to Beaufort. In 1847 the Admiralty awarded the survivors to the date of the boarding party the Naval General Service Medal with clasp the 27th of October. Boat Service 1800. On the 16th of May 1801, boats from Phaeton and Naiad under the direction of Naiad's first lieutenant entered the port of Marin, Pontevedra, in Galicia in northwest Spain. They captured the Spanish corvette Alcudia and destroyed the armed packet Rapazo, both under the protection of a battery of 5 24-pounders. Alcudia, commanded by Don Juan Antonio Barbuto, was moored stem and stern close to the fort. Her sails had previously been taken ashore, so the boats had to tow her out, but soon after a strong southwest wind set in and it was necessary to set her on fire. Only 4 men from the 2 British ships were wounded. Phaeton then returned to Britain and was paid off in March 1802. East Indies. In July 1803, Captain George Cockburn recommissioned Phaeton for service in the Far East. Later in 1804, she and HMS Lancaster chased the French privateer Henriette back to Port Louis. Also, Phaeton recaptured the Mornington, which the French privateer Nicolas Surcouf in Caroline had captured on 14 August 1804. Captain Fallonard of the brig Isle de France recaptured Mornington. The British recaptured Mornington again as she continued to sail under the British ensign until she was burnt in the Bay of Bengal in 1816. On the 2nd of August 1805, under Captain John Wood, Phaeton fought the 40-gun Saint-Melanti, Captain Leonard Bernard Motard, in the San Bernardino Strait off San Jacinto, Philippines, together with the 18-gun cruiser-class brig sloop Harrier, Captain Edward Ratsey. After exchanges of fire first with Harrier and then with Phaeton, Saint-Melanti took refuge under the guns of a shore battery. Unable to dislodge her, the 2 British vessels eventually sailed off, each having suffered 2 men wounded. Saint-Melanti was reported to have suffered 13 killed and 36 wounded. After resupplying at San Jacinto, Saint-Melanti intended to sail for Mexico in March 1805 to fetch specie for the Philippines. The encounter with Phaeton and Harrier foiled the plan. Motard returned to the Indian Ocean, operating for the next 3 years against British shipping from Isle de France. In October 1806, Captain John Wood took command of Phaeton. Then in July 1808, Captain Fleetwood Pellew succeeded him. Nagasaki Harbour Incident. After the French had conquered the Batavian Republic and Napoleon began to use its resources against England, Royal Navy ships started to prey on Dutch shipping. In 1808, Phaeton, by now under the command of Pellew, entered Nagasaki's harbour to ambush a couple of Dutch trading ships that were expected to arrive shortly. Phaeton entered the harbour on the 4th of October surreptitiously under a Dutch flag. Despite the arrival of this Dutch ship being later in the season than normal, the Japanese and Dutch representatives did not suspect anything. So, Dutch representatives from the Nagasaki trading enclave of Dejima rowed out to welcome the visiting ship, but, as they approached, Phaeton lowered a tender and captured the Dutch representatives, while their Japanese escorts jumped into the sea and fled. Pellew threatened to execute the Dutch representatives unless supplies were delivered to Phaeton. Phaeton also fired cannons and muskets to press her demands, and Pellew threatened to destroy the Japanese and Chinese ships in the harbour. The cannons in the Japanese harbour defences were old and most could not even fire. Consequently, the meagre Japanese forces in Nagasaki were seriously outgunned and unable to intervene. At the time, it was the Saga clan's turn to uphold the policy of Sakoku and to protect Nagasaki, but they had economized by stationing only 100 troops there, instead of the 1,000 officially required for the station. The Nagasaki magistrate, Matsudera Yasuhide, immediately ordered troops from the neighboring areas of Kyushu Island. The Japanese mobilized a force of 8,000 samurai and 40 ships to confront the Phaeton, but they could not arrive for a few days. In the meantime, the Nagasaki magistrate decided to respond to the ship's demands, and provided supplies. Phaeton left 2 days later on the 7th of October, before the arrival of Japanese reinforcements, and after Pellew had learned that the Dutch trading ships would not be coming that year. He left behind a letter for the Dutch director Hendrik Def. The Nagasaki magistrate, Matsudera, took responsibility by committing suicide by seppuku. Following the attack of the Phaeton, the Bakufu reinforced coastal defenses, and promulgated a law prohibiting foreigners coming ashore, on pain of death. The Bakufu also requested that official interpreters learn English and Russian, departing from the prior focus on Dutch studies. In 1814, the Dutch interpreter Motoki Shozimon wrote the first English-Japanese dictionary. After Nagasaki, Pellew was confirmed in his rank of post captain on 14 October 1808, and went on to see action in the invasion of Ile-de-France in 1810 and the reduction of Java in 1811. In May, Phaeton escorted the 2nd Division of British troops, commanded by Major General Frederick Auguste Wetherell, from Madras to Prince of Wales Island, and then on to Malacca. Once the expedition reached Batavia, Phaeton and 3 of the other frigates patrolled for French frigates known to be in the area. On the 31st of August, a landing party from Phaeton and Sir Francis Drake, together with Marines from Hussar, captured a fort from the French at Sumenep on the island of Madura off Java. The British lost 3 men killed and 28 wounded. Pellew sailed Phaeton home in August 1812, escorting a convoy of East Indiamen. For his services he received a present of 500 guineas and the thanks of the East India Company. Post-war, in 1816, Captain Francis Stanfell sailed Phaeton from Sheerness, bound for St. Helena and the Cape of Good Hope. In April 1818, Captain W. H. Dillon commissioned Phaeton. In the autumn of 1818, Lieutenant John Geary, who had joined Phaeton at her recommissioning, faced a court-martial. The charges were that he had concealed 2 deserters from the band of the 18th Regiment of Foot. More formally, the charges were inveigling musicians from one of the regiments in garrison and with practicing deception towards the officers who were sent on board to search for them. The board found him guilty. He was severely reprimanded and dismissed from Phaeton. Robert Cavendish Spencer, late of Ganymede, a captain on the board, thought enough of Geary to shake his hand and offer him a job in the future. Several years later Spencer made good on his offer. Phaeton went on to the East Indies. In October 1819 she was paid off and then recommissioned within the month under Captain William Augustus Montague, for Halifax. She was paid off in September 1822. She was immediately recommissioned under Captain Henry Evelyn Pitfield Sturt. She sailed for Gibraltar and Algeciras and was paid off some 3 years later. Phaeton was sold on the 11th of July 1827 to a Mr. Freak for 3,430 liras, but the Navy office cancelled the sale, Mr. Freak having been declared insane. Quote, she was finally sold on the 26th of March 1828 for 2,500 liras to Joshua Crystal for breaking up. In popular media, the Nagasaki harbor incident plays a role in the novel The Thousand Autumns of Jacob Dazout by David Mitchell. However, this depiction is highly fictionalized. The ship in the novel is HMS Phaeton. The incident occurs in 1800 and finding no Dutch ships, the Phoebus of the novel bombards Dejima. The Nagasaki harbor incident plays a role in the novel Lied of Tyrants by Naomi Novik. This depiction is historical fantasy. The Japanese sink HMS Phaeton with dragons stationed at Nagasaki at the time.